The 1960s mark a narrow window where colonial administrations are collapsing simultaneously across the continent. Foreign flags are coming down, and dozens of newly independent nations are suddenly in control of their own governments. But one leader looks at this newly drawn map and sees a trap. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, steps to the podium and delivers a blunt ultimatum: Africa must unite or perish. Nkrumah demands a single continental government, stretching from Cairo to Cape Town. He pushes for a unified military command to protect the continent, and a single common currency to replace the money of former colonizers. Nkrumah understands that flying a new flag means very little if a country still relies on Europe to balance its budget or arm its military. Without total integration, these young nations remain isolated, weak, and highly lucrative targets for foreign exploitation. Two distinct camps immediately form. The Casablanca group lines with Nkrumah, demanding an immediate, borderless political union. On the side, the Monrovia group, led by states like Nigeria and Liberia, prefers a slow, cautious approach to economic cooperation to protect their hard-won national sovereignty. The cautious pragmatists win the debate. In 1963, leaders gather in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to sign a compromise, the Organization of African Union, or OAU. The OAU is established as a forum for cooperation, but it holds no binding authority over its member states. By rejecting a single government, the OAU treaty permanently locks in the artificial borders drawn decades earlier by European powers at the 1884 Berlin Conference. Lines that split ethnic groups and lumped historical rivals together are now protected by international law. These specific borders were originally designed for one purpose: extracting resources to the coast. The rail lines and roads of these independent countries are built to ship raw materials directly to London and Paris, rather than facilitating trade with the country right next door. By choosing the safety of national borders over the friction of a continental union, Africa divides itself into 54 separate economies. Structurally, they are now forced to compete against one another for the approval and capital of Western markets. That vulnerability is soon locked into the global financial system through a 1974 deal. The United States offers military protection to the Saudi royal family, and in exchange, Saudi oil is sold exclusively in US dollars, creating the petrodollar system. Because energy is priced in dollars, Africa exports physical wealth, cobalt, gold, crude oil, to acquire US currency for trade. But those dollars don't stay in Africa. They move through a recycling loop, loaned back to the US via treasury bonds, funding Western deficits. African labor and raw materials are financing American debt. As long as a continent's natural wealth is priced in and controlled by a currency it cannot print, true economic independence is a mathematical impossibility. One leader attempts to break this cycle, along with the CFA franc, a currency printed in France and used by 14 African nations. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi begins quietly organizing a massive financial rebellion. By 2011, Gaddafi's central bank accumulates an estimated 143 tons of gold. His strategy is to launch a pan-African gold-backed currency called the dinar. If successful, African nations could demand payment for their oil and minerals in physical gold, bypassing Western currencies entirely. Declassified intelligence emails later reveal that European officials view this gold-backed alternative as a severe threat to their own banking systems. Soon after, a NATO coalition intervenes in Libya, leading directly to Gaddafi's execution and the disappearance of those gold reserves. When a single, high-profile leader attempts to rewrite global finance from the top down, they become a visible target for military intervention. A broader, systemic strategy is required to build a more resilient financial shield. Today, rather than waiting for 54 countries to agree in a boardroom, smaller coalitions are taking immediate action. Leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso are forming rapid regional blocs, such as the Alliance of Sahel States, to consolidate military and economic power outside traditional bureaucracy. These nations are executing a quiet rebellion. They are actively settling cross-border trades using their own local currencies or directly exchanging resources for gold, intentionally cutting the US dollar out of the transaction. Simultaneously, the African Union is preparing to launch an African credit rating agency. Instead of relying on agencies in New York and London, which historically assign high risk scores that make borrowing expensive, Africa will assess its own financial risk to fund internal development. They are also looking to turn geography into geopolitical leverage. Proposals for massive solar arrays across the Sahara Desert would not only power the entire continent's industrial grid, but produce excess clean energy to export to Europe on Africa's own terms. By building decentralized, parallel economic systems, modern African states are creating a financial network that the West cannot easily sanction, blockade, or bomb. Treaties and new currencies are useless if the people remain divided. Presidents and summits cannot force a continent to unite. Only the people living there have that power. The greatest threat to this project comes from within. Artificial borders breed resource scarcity, and that scarcity fuels xenophobia. When citizens attack migrants from neighboring countries, as seen in recent years in South Africa, they are doing the work of their former colonizers for them. Real unity requires a social pact from everyday citizens. It means aggressively challenging anti-African hate whenever it surfaces in daily life, and doing the basic work of learning the history and culture of the country next door. It also requires an economic pact. It means intentionally buying from cross-border Pan-African businesses, supporting regional creators, and reversing the brain drain by actively bringing diaspora skills and capital back home to build local industries. Kwame Nkrumah's 1960s political dream of a single state failed because it relied on the top-down signatures of 54 politicians. The modern version of the United States of Africa is being built right now through economic sovereignty and the daily choices of ordinary people.